TellyCast, the TV industry news review.
On this week's show, my guests are Jean Dong of Anglo-Chinese format producer Zesper Media, Barry Ryan, boss of UK Indies Free at Last and The Format Factory, and Sam Conniff, writer, producer and director of the brand new live immersive documentary series, The Uncertainty Experts. It's all coming up on this week's TellyCast. So my first guest on this week's TellyCast, we've connected via Skype in the end. We've tried about 4 or 5 different ways to communicate, and finally we have. So I'm delighted to welcome Jean Dong, chairman of Zesper Media in Beijing. How are you doing, Jean?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Hi, Justin.
Hi. Thank you for joining us, and various technical issues. But I suppose that sheds a bit of light on one of the things I wanted to talk about is, communication within the TV industry between China and the rest of the world. But we'll come on to that in a second. For those who don't know you, I've known you, Jean, for quite a few years. We've met at various international TV industry events back pre-pandemic days. Tell us about your business, Zesper Media, and its history and what you're doing now.
Yeah, sure. Well, Zesper Media group of companies were founded 10 years ago, and now we are in 2 parts of the world. We have our company in China and also in the UK. So we were set up to help, primarily to help international content creators and rights owners to do business in China. So that's us in a snapshot. So in the past, we worked with large media groups from Endemol Shine, Vantage, Zodiac, to Warner Brothers, etc. Also with smaller independent companies from the UK, US, and Europe. So in the UK now, we work with IP owners, and we represent them and we help them commercialize their content in China. So we also do co-development and co-productions. And in China, we have our own independent production company, and we work with all the local national broadcasters, from the state broadcaster satellite channels to VOD platforms.
I can only talk from a UK indie perspective, but I'm sure there's been lots of other efforts to try and build relationships and co-productions between indie producers in different territories around the world and China. But speaking about the UK, it seems to have got to a certain level of integration, but then it seems to peter out in some aspects. But obviously you've got a successful business, so you must be doing something right in order to make that work. What do you think the barriers are then? In terms of co-producing content, first of all, let's say content from outside China and adapting that for Chinese broadcasters or Chinese social media platforms.
Yeah, well, I think in the last 10 days of Zesper's history, we pretty much witnessed how Chinese media market was opened very nicely to the international world and then closed very quickly in that regard. So, well, first it was, I think in the heydays, it was more on the format kind of business, which was for China to license and adapt international format, mainly in the entertainment genre for Chinese local television. So all the best formats, all the good formats were licensed in China, quickly produced for 1 or 2 seasons. But a lot of them fizzled out. And also Chinese government, here we really need to reinforce the prominence and formidable Chinese government's role in the whole market. They can put in restrictions which quite quickly could shut down any business. So format business was quickly shut down by the government when they applied restrictions to broadcasters in China, not allowing them to put on air international format adaptations. So, well, China at one point were buying formats like designer bags, but then also they exhausted the formats quite quickly, and a lot of formats were done only for, like I said, 1 or 2 seasons, and then just fizzled out. And of course, with the government's intervention. And so China starting to do their own formats quite quickly. Of course, there were also copycat formats. They took inspirations, let's say, from different formats and made their own. So entertainment, non-scripted formats business had its heyday, but quite quickly, a few years ago, became non-starter now.
It was about 5 years ago. I mean, it seemed to be, as you say, it was a bit of a heyday. I mean, as I know, there was a lot of big co-investments from Hollywood and certainly a lot of the big international format producers and distribution companies were, as you say, it's a good analogy. It's like designer bags. A lot of the, you would saw The Voice and all the biggest formats in the world seem to be getting produced all the time. But there's been a certain cooling now. So essentially, that's down to restrictions, isn't it? That's down to what can be made and how many international formats can be made. And is it also about ownership of domestic Chinese companies in that IP as well?
Well, yeah, I think the Chinese IP law is always different to the international IP laws. So yeah, in China, there is always a dispute that the Chinese producer or broadcaster or investor who have put in money and effort to make the local version, and they want to own the local version of the full IP. So that's always a sticking point. But I think, yeah, that's always in the nitty-gritty of the negotiation. But I think the main trend, the reason for the trend to peter out was really, from both the government and also from the industry. So the entertainment format has been and gone. What we do feel there are opportunities as scripted formats, and that's something we're focusing on. Yeah, one strand of our businesses.
So tell us about your latest projects then at Zesper and what is working, because obviously you're having to negotiate these different rule changes as well.
Yeah, well, this is related to scripted formats. Our latest project, and I think now I can talk about it, is that one of our clients, which is the Agatha Christie Limited in the UK, we have now worked with them for a few years, and China has taken on one of their stories and going to develop that into local Chinese TV series. So that's the headline news at the moment.
Right.
So we're working with one of the top VOD platforms in China called iQIYI. So they are doing the adaptation. So actually the filming will be starting this weekend.
Right. Okay. And obviously there's a rich catalogue there. If it works, then there's potentially a number of returning series, which is obviously what you're hoping.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we want to say to the UK or international content owner rights holders, that good stories always travel well, and they could have good, successful adaptations in different cultures and countries, and China included.
Right. So essentially, we're saying that the main opportunity now for international businesses into China is really in scripted formats. And if you've got a catalogue or the rights to some fantastic, classic content like Agatha Christie's back catalogue, then there still are rich opportunities for you in China.
Yeah, that we can say that. Again, though, I mean, not any good story can travel to China. Of course, we have our local culture, local restrictions. We need to observe a range of guidelines from the government again and that's what we do to curate and select from all the catalogs from the international world to find the right stories for China.
Yeah, of course. Now tell us about what's hot in China right now, because in many ways, China leads the world in, certainly when it comes to social media and adaptations of social media and social media becoming a platform for entertainment. So tell us what's happening right now in China in terms of content and platforms.
I just want to give you a snapshot of how productions work in China. Us being an independent production house in China, we have experience dealing with broadcasters and brands. And over here, I really want to reinforce that knowing good brands and sponsors are the key of making good programs in China. And this could be quite odd for the UK peers, but in China, this is the norm. It has become very normal for us as producers to raise sponsorships ourselves. So we effectively, the broadcasters, TV or VOD, they wait for us to raise part of the sponsorship before we could pitch our program. So that makes us as producer work very closely with advertisers and sponsors. So that's one reality we have to face. So creatively, we have to create content that are sponsor friendly. And sometimes the sponsor would take quite an integral part in how the program is created, so and designed almost. So we have to find the balance between pleasing the sponsor and make it entertaining and creatively worthwhile. So that's a reality that we all have to face.
That's actually a very similar challenge that we've discussed on previous episodes of TellyCast when we talked about ad-funded programming. But it's interesting to realize that actually that is the norm. It's very much the norm. And actually you need to get a sponsor on board first before you even start pitching. That's fascinating. And as a producer in China, you also have to be part agency, part producer.
Exactly. For any good-sized production company, we always have a commercial department who talk directly with brands and advertising companies.
Right. And so when it comes to the social platforms in China, they are now becoming, some of the main outlets for content now, aren't they? In terms of linear broadcast, is that starting to die away? This is something I really like to share also with our international colleagues, that in China we have a lot of quite innovative ways for content to work with brands and also sometimes cut out TV altogether. I was talking to you earlier, Justin, about the Chinese live stream culture that big online outlets like Alibaba have their own content platforms. So they invite, or the brands, the product side invite celebrities to do live streams, and mainly it's very much like teleshopping in the UK, if we draw an equation, and they talk tirelessly about the products, or try it, eat it, put it on their face, and offer discounts. So celebrities using their cloud and their following to sell the products directly. And that sometimes it's entertaining content because they could be singing and, they do entertaining stuff, and people right away can place order and buy stuff. And such celebrity talent can take a share of the sales of that night. So TV has been made redundant in that case. And this is a much preferred way of advertising and sales, because you put them together, because the constant debate is that when you put adverts on TV, how much sales could that generate? And in this case in China, that has it's been done in one go. So that's a very interesting phenomenon. And also, like takeaway apps, etc., where people are eating, you could watch them, check out different restaurants, enjoying the food, and then you can make your booking. So they're really using content to generate commercial opportunities, and that's much preferred by the sponsors. I mean, I know Amazon are trying it in the US, but it certainly doesn't seem as integrated into the content mix as it does in China. So that's definitely a pointer for us. What about your story of the week, Jean? What have you seen in the TV industry in the past 7 days or so that you found relevant or interesting or inspiring or surprising? What's your story of the week?
My story of the it's not a story of the week per se. It's more of a observation or a story that happens every week that I have some thoughts on. And this is very much related to the industry of the international media world. That there are different companies being sold, being merged, being acquired, companies broken down, and there are so many changes taking place, and that's news we read all the time, and it happens around us. And us being buyers of content or licensees or collaborator, we found it quite difficult to navigate with all kinds of changing parts taking place. It's quite hard to identify whom we should talk to, or the previous people in that company told us we have to talk to someone else now. And so some content we identified, want to talk about, nobody knows which department should talk to us. So in a way, we were saying doing business with China is difficult. But again, from China point of view, from our point of view, we found doing business with international media groups are difficult too. I mean, they're always changing.
Yes.
So that's it's not a story, it's more observation or reflection.
Well, I think many people would share that frustration. And I mean, to be honest, Jean, I mean, the fact that you've been able to navigate not only the changes in the media laws in China and, look at factual and then pivot into scripted, and then you're working with commercial brands on social platforms, it's testament to how you've been able to keep ahead of the game when the rules seem to be shifting all the time, not only internally but externally, and all these, as you say, all these buyouts and mergers.
Yeah, exactly. Justin, could I just quickly go back to co-production, if that's something I could talk about in terms of what opportunities there are in China?
Please, I think our audience would be really interested in seeing how they can work with you, because China is just this huge market. It seems a great opportunity, but there always seems to be barriers that are put up to us collaborating. But yeah, please do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were earlier talking about scripted content, and another strand that we know could also work in China are factual programs, and that is very much in the space of co-development and co-production. So we are always on the lookout to work with good production companies who come up with good ideas, and to co-produce with China. So there are a few boxes we need to tick in terms of the kind of program ideas. And as we were saying, what's happening in China is that one of the biggest trends is China has becoming more and more inward looking. We are encouraged to celebrate our own culture and enjoy our own things. It's local content for local people sort of mentality. So we need to, so when it comes to co-production, we do want to work with international partners, but the storytelling, the subject matter need to be more China related. So it could be Chinese food in worldwide, or Chinese language, or Chinese personalities, or vice versa, or international people in China, or, how international cuisine were adapted in China, subject matters like that would be interesting. So it needs to be a fusion of China and the world. And only then, the Chinese broadcaster would be interested. And also it should appeal to international broadcaster as well, because, it should have international elements in it too. So the holy grail would be to have a factual program that talk about things that's related to China and the world. And we could have it aired by broadcasters in both China and overseas.
There must be lots of opportunities for that, mustn't there? Like, there's the whole Chinese diaspora across the world and the communities that are there. There must be stories even there that could be reflected back into China, and but also, as you say, are internationally sellable.
Absolutely.
But, so the message is that the door's still open. We've just got to work a little bit harder, and it's interesting what you say about China becoming slightly more inward looking. I mean, that's what we've found everywhere, isn't it? That's a trend around the world, make America great again, and Brexit and everything else. It's a trend that we're finding everywhere. So we just need to work a little bit harder on those international collaborations.
Yes.
So how about your hero of the week and what or who you're going to put in the bin? How about your hero? Who's your hero of the week?
Well, a hero of the week, it's a very interesting news I read in Spain this week about this literature prize called Planeta, and the best writer was this lady writer in her 40s, apparently, called Carmen Mola, and she has written a trilogy of crime novels that were highly celebrated. But when she was called onto the stage, 3 men turned up, 3 men in their 40s and 50s, 3 screenwriters, and then they came clean that they were the people behind this Carmen Mola, and this lady doesn't exist. So I found that really interesting. And I mean, all the feminism stuff aside, I just think it's such a clever play on almost like a double fiction, because the fiction writer herself is a fiction. So I thought that was quite amusing. That's
fascinating. Well, we'll put a link to that story in the episode description of the show so everybody can take a look at that. And how about who or what you're putting in the bin, Jean?
Well, I would love to put Harry and Meghan into the bin. I mean, I'm a Chinese and all, but I'd really enjoy the British culture, and I just find it so disgusting. Sorry to use strong words, but it's that the way that Harry and Meghan have used and tarnished the UK's royal family by their selfishness and greed. And it was quite sad to see the Queen walking with a walking stick this week, and just feel this couple has taken away so much grace from this country. So I definitely want to bin them if I could.
Right. Okay. Well, that's Harry and Meghan going in the bin there for the first time, and that's also, it's a really interesting subject that a lot of people have got a lot of different opinions on, and it's interesting to see it reflected back to us from China, and how different international communities may view this. But it's also very universal as well, isn't it? I suppose the grandma, the kids that are perhaps more disruptive and all of that. I think it's a family, right? We all can recognize a little bit of that.
Yeah. I think, it's sad to see it happening, to see a family breaking apart, and also a quintessential figure of the UK culture breaking apart. So, but I can tell you that in China, we don't have many fans of Harry and Meghan. Everyone is putting their bet on when the divorce will take place. In the next few years.
Right.
Anyway. Controversial, I suppose.
Controversial. Well, no, we like a bit of controversy, Jean. That's what, Jean. It's been lovely to have you on. Thank you for bearing with us while we establish an audio connection with Beijing that we can record and share it with all the TellyCast listeners. So thanks again. I'd love for you to come back on the show, Jean, and have a wider conversation about China, because it's not something we can round up in a 20-minute chat. So if you'd be happy to come back, we'd love to have you back on the show. Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Jean. We'll speak to you very soon. Yeah. All right. Cheers. So my next guest on this week's TellyCast is Barry Ryan from Free at Last TV and The Format Factory. How you doing, Barry?
I'm really well, thank you.
Welcome to the show. The last time we saw each other was at a packed event pre-lockdown 1. In fact, the world was starting to lock down, and it was the very last event down in Surrey, I guess about 18 months ago now. How have things been for you since then?
So it was the week before lockdown, and I remember it precisely because it was called Content Without Borders, and it was a residential thing, and it was the moment where we all suddenly realized that we weren't going to be able to continue as we had been. So we were 3 days away from principal photography on our flagship show, Agatha Raisin, in season 4 of that. To put that into perspective, we've only just completed that series now, which starts going out in December. So it was the week where the disaster was kind of laid out in front of us.
And I remember there was lots of discussion about insurance at that point. That seemed to be the overall key topic of conversation. Have you got insurance? Will it covered?
Yeah.
Will it be covered?
Well, none of us knew. So even though we have all that, we're insured up to above our body weight and height. None of us knew if it covered this very thing, because we all sign contracts, and we have for 30, 40 years, that have force majeure in them. And we all just kind of go, what's that? Act of God? Yeah, okay. We're going to be okay. And then suddenly we have an act of God, and then suddenly we have to realise and understand what we've actually signed. So, and there was all sorts of insurance stuff floating about that, insurance companies won't honour it. And then there was the other conversation, which was that there was a cut-off date. So if you'd signed your insurance before this date, you were okay. And if you'd signed it after, there was a likelihood that you weren't going to be. And our government didn't have a clue. So we were kind of in a limbo and a no man's land that no one could have foresawn, but also that none of us really knew how to navigate best the next steps. Our jobs as producers, when people say to me, what do you do? You're a producer. I go, everything that needs to be done to make the thing happen. And then everything after it's happened to make sure that people see it and it goes somewhere. So with that as my lead, I didn't really have a clue what my next step was, because none of us knew where it was going, or we couldn't be in control of it. And we're control freaks by necessity. So we were all where our job titles were completely meaningless.
Yeah, feels like a lifetime ago, doesn't it?
I
mean, it's a lot of water under the bridge. And so you produce Agatha Raisin for AMC, and that is that for Acorn TV?
Yeah, so it goes out on Acorn TV, and then we are. That's our primary place. That's where you find us. And then it's distributed in other territories on other places too. So Acorn TV didn't exist when we started making the show. So it exists on Sky in the UK and France 2 in France, and then ZDF in Germany. So there's relationships that are honoured, but the primary place is Acorn.
Right. Okay. And did you say that's the 4th season?
Yeah. We're really, really lucky. Right. I get it. Not many shows last for 4 seasons. We are threatening the world with a series 5 currently. So, we're very lucky.
Well, congratulations on the success of that. So tell us about Free at Last then. Give us a bit of background about your company, because I know, and we'll talk about the Format Factory, which is another business of yours in a second, but give us a bit of a background to Free at Last, and as well as Agatha Raisin, what other projects have you got on the go?
Okay, so the companies are entwined. They are sister companies. So basically, Free at Last is 21 years old. We were 20 years old in the pandemic, which prevented us having a bit of a do. Free at Last was the house I built to house my stuff. So I have got a checkered background. So I was in music. I was a university lecturer. I was a writer. I was a journalist. Television presenter. I did all sorts of things. And when I went into telly as a producer, I was one of those pesky things that the BBC calls a trainee, except I was probably the oldest trainee in the history of the scheme. And they train you to do lots of things. So, you're doing Live and Kicking over here, then you're doing Horizon over there, then you're doing 999, then you're doing Animal Hospital. So, and then at the end, they expect you to stop all that and just do one. And that's not me. So I left immediately when the scheme ended and went to ITV to make a music show. And then every 6 months for the following, 5 years, every 6 months I was changing company or desk and moving and hacking about. And quite often I invented my own work. So I kind of thought that if I put it all in one place, I won't have to move desk every 6 months and I won't have to pack everything up and shift about so much. So Free at Last is the house I built to house me. And so we started off doing the stuff that I was known for, which was pop culture, factual entertainment, music entertainment. So I was part of the team that launched Glastonbury on the BBC. I'd worked in music entertainment. I'd done lots and lots of different things. And so I just that's how Free at Last started. So we started off with a kind of unofficial output deal with a channel called UK Play. And we made a load of music stuff for 6 months. So we did a daily music show called Get Your Hits Out with Lauren Laverne. We did history of punk rock. We did a biography series. We did a documentary about Eminem. So that kind of stuff. And then we shifted over across into pop culture stuff with Channel 5 and did the Spider-Man story, Batman story, things like that. And then we did quite a big show called Martina Cole's Lady Killers for ITV3, but it transferred to ITV1. Around about that time, we'd also got a commission to do a sketch show with Gina Yashere, who's a British black comedian, kind of brilliant. She's currently on CBS with her own Chuck Lorre co-produced show called Bob Hart's Abishola, the number 2 show on CBS now. So she was a rising star then, and we did a pilot for her for Comedy Central. And that gave us the kind of bug of scripted. So we were developing Agatha Raisin kind of around that time, from that time onwards. And then that was commissioned in 2014. And after that happened, we were getting kind of weird feedback from people about, oh, God, Barry, I don't really know what it is you do anymore. You know, you're scripted here, you're factual there, you're documentary here. So we decided to split them into 2. So the Format Factory is everything that Free at Last did before it did scripted. And Free at Last is exclusively scripted comedy and drama.
And so on the unscripted side today then, what are your current projects? And how do you work when it comes to working with distributors? Do you work with them on a case-by-case basis on shows to sell them internationally, or do you have any sort of investment? How does that work?
We do. We're very boutique, and we're very bespoke. So Format Factory currently has a couple of commissions. So we're making a feature-length documentary about Jerry Anderson with Jamie Anderson of Anderson Entertainment, who's Jerry's son. And that funding model for that is part of the money is coming from the theatrical, part of the money is coming from BritBox, and part of the money is coming from the rest of the world via Abacus Media. And then we have a CBBC commission. So we made a show in lockdown called My Mini Life, about a 14-year-old girl who isn't allowing her ambition to be a dancer be thwarted by the fact that she has an artificial leg. So we made that in lockdown. And as a result of that, we've got another commission from CBBC in that factual strand, My Life, where we're following a 14-year-old working class kid who has ambitions to be an F1 driver. So that's called My 100 Miles Per Hour Superpower. And that's in production now. And then we're also making it behind the scenes of Agatha Raisin, because we wouldn't let anyone else make it, because why would we? So called Agatha Land. And so each of those is funded, in very individual ways. And in terms of our dramas, every single one of our dramas in development has a completely unique and bespoke business plan. We have worked with distributors. We had I wouldn't call it a first look, I don't know what we would call it, but we had a 2-year relationship with Sky Studios, but we signed that before their reorganisation, so it was all skewed by the Comcast acquisition. And then we have relationships with individual dramas, with other distribution partners. The only condition that we have for how we work with people is that they have to be relevant to the project. So we have a Canadian / Welsh drama in development, and that business plan is populated by people who are relevant to those territories.
So there's obviously a lot going on both businesses, both on the scripted side and unscripted. And here we are coming into winter 21. We're starting to see, and I don't want to jinx anything, but I'm starting to see rising COVID figures. There's talk of new variants and all the rest of it. Let's look on the positive side, first of all. In terms of that last COVID pandemic period, you said that on the scripted side, it took you, almost 18 months to get Agatha Raisin Series 4 out of the door and onto Acorn. And you did 1 or 2 unscripted shows as well. I mean, have you found that period was difficult for you, or actually have you found that it's opened up more opportunities? Because we're seeing more and more of that with people that, they've gone into super development and now they're getting everything commissioned. How is it for you as a small indie?
Okay, so we've run a company for 21 years, and every single time there's been something in the world that's had repercussions and the ripples. We've been at the wrong end of that generally. So for the first time, we were in a position where we were doing all right beforehand. It was a pain in the arse completely. It changed everything and how we did everything. But in terms of us, we were okay and we could survive it. We could look ahead and go, yeah, this isn't great, but it's not going to close us down and it's not disastrous. Whereas before, we've always been under the threat of that. So, and we're an indie that doesn't have backers and we don't have investors. It's just us. We are what would be called vulnerable. But we knew that at some point, Series 4 would happen. Or, it was contractually in place. It was written, we were 3 days away from the first day of principal photography. So we knew that there were conversations that were going to happen further down the line. So for us, what we had to do was look around us and go, what can we do? Now, for Format Factory, the response was completely different because, there's the whole element of topical. There's things you can do. But one of the things that I was kind of adamant about is that I didn't really want to start making lockdown shows. I look at TV now and there's dramas that I can see that have been shot in lockdown, and it frustrates the life out of me that, it's this period that we will always go, well, that must have been 2020 because look at the distance between all the actors. I just didn't want to make shows that were creating a COVID legacy.
Do you think the audience can tell that? Do you think, or is that a producer's eye?
I'm not sure. I think that's probably a producer's eye, and I just find it a bit depressing, and that's my taste. But I also think there's things that people could have done to mitigate that, like the whole shooting through screens thing and the whole, you can position a camera where you can minimize that, and there's some shows that haven't anyway. But for me, it's just not what I wanted to do. When the people started to pour out lockdown things that looked like lockdown, I wanted to look at anything else other than that. So we decided not to do that. Format Factory had a dating format that it played with for a while, which we've extended out now to be a distance dating format. But we didn't want to look at that stuff. So we wanted to look ahead at what we wanted to be making when we came out of this. And then because we had rights and options on things, it seemed to us that the best thing that we could do was do what you said before, which is to hyper drive our development slate, which we did. And that is actually, as you've also said, showing dividends for us now. We've got into a place, actually I've got some book series where there's 40 books. And of course, before COVID, there was no chance I was ever going to have time to read those. Whereas actually lockdown gave me the time to kind of really embrace some of the projects that I've got and show them some love in a long-term overview way, and to kind of organize them. So instead of reading just 4 books at a time, I've actually managed to get ahead and actually have a massive overview in terms of where that series is going to go. So that, so we kind of hyperdrived it in that way. And also there were some originals and some writers that had approached us with things that we thought, actually, this is the time where we can show those people some attention and we can mentor in a meaningful way now because we've got the time to be able to do that. So we've done that as well.
I'm going to ask you this, which you're probably going to hate this, but if we do have another lockdown, if we do, I mean, is that something that you've planned for, half expected, or is it, and if so, obviously it depends on what government guidelines are going to be, but do you think that it will have a massive impact on what you do, or do you think that it's something that now we know what we know, and as you say, a lot of people have got experience of filming through lockdown. Do you think it's something that might not affect you quite in the same way as it did last year?
I think it depends on the fear. I think I don't think we'd have the fear that we had the last time. And fear is a great paralyzer, and fear makes people not do things rather than what we normally do, which is to do things. And we now this time maybe we'll do things in a different way. I'm not holding my breath for government guidelines because the government guidelines haven't been helpful at any point along the way. So I think we have to take the lead as the people who know what it is we do and we need to do every day. We now know what our processes need to be and how to protect our people, and also what we need to do to make sure COVID, even if it's in the world, doesn't invade in a way that would be disastrous for what we're doing.
Yeah. So we started this conversation, Barry, when reminiscing back to Content Without Borders, in April 2019.
Yes, those vintage days.
So what about events for you then? Have you been to any industry events? We were at MIPCOM last week and NEM a few weeks before that. Have you got plans to attend any markets or events in the next few weeks?
So when lockdown stopped, when it finished, on the Monday I went for a curry. On the Tuesday, I saw stand-up. On the Wednesday, I saw a gig. On the Thursday, I can't remember what I did. And on the Friday, I went to the theatre. So I was on the starting block from January the 1st to go. The minute I could be out, I was out. I can't live in fear. It's not something that I do or want to do. And so I have been at things since we were allowed to go. I've been to 3 literary festivals. I've been to... didn't go to MIP because husband and partner in For It Last David was 60 in lockdown, and I bought him a gig in New York, which was rescheduled, and it was going to be on the week of MIP. And then when it was cancelled only a week before, we couldn't be bothered thinking about MIP, and it just didn't, because it wasn't something you have to plan for those markets, and we hadn't. So we thought there's no point going because we're not ready. Yeah. And also all the kind of conversations that I need to have with the people who were there are already happening. So this felt like a MIP we could skip.
Right.
So we did. And I like to be prepared for those things. I don't like to go just on an ad hoc basis. And we weren't ready, so we didn't go. But yeah, I've been out and about at events, and I'm not scared of them. One of the things, I do get really bad winter blues, so I booked a lot of things in January just because I wanted stuff in the diary to look ahead to. So one of the things that we are doing is on the 15th of December, we're sailing to New York, and everyone's going, are you mad getting on a boat with thousands of people? And I'm like, well, I might be, but it's not going to stop me doing it. I need to know that I'm doing, and so I just do. I'm not scared.
Will you be at Real Screen for the Format Factory? Will you be going over there?
Yes, we will. Yeah, we will. And, I think it's really important. I like being in the room. So the Zoom thing and all of that is fine. And if that's what people want to do, fine, I'll do it with them. But, being in the room with people and having those conversations and doing things as a collective is as important as it was before. Maybe it will rationalize how we do that. And maybe it will... maybe there's strength in both. You know what I mean? I mean, some of the Zoom things are making some of my processes quicker, rather than the physical meetings. But I don't want to surrender either of them. If I'm honest, I think that it's taught us that there are expeditious ways that we could be doing things, and then there are some things where we all need to be in the same room, having that collective conversation that you can't really do on a Zoom.
And now it's time in the show for Barry's Story of the Week, the TV industry story from the past 7 days that he's found relevant, interesting, surprising, upsetting, inspiring, anything. Barry, what's your story of the week?
So my story is the whole furore about the Dave Chappelle special on Netflix. So I wasn't shocked about the Chappelle story, but I'm surprised by some of the other things that have been borne out by the furore around it. The actual show itself is quite lame. It's called a special, but there's not a load of special in it. It's actually, at some points, I found it quite cringy. Is it Chappelle's best work? No, definitely not. So, but once you see the show itself, for me, it wasn't worthy of the fuss.
What is the fuss? Could you just explain that for us, Barry? What the fuss is all about?
Well, it's so the fuss has been about his ranting. And there's no other word to say it. There's a lot of ranting in the show about trans and trans issues and LGBTQ questions. But his take on it is, for me, it's just another dull straight man's obsession with what's going on down below. So it's about the trans genitalia. And it made me ask questions away from that. It made me ask what's up with Chappelle, that this is what he wants to talk about. It seemed to me that it's spotlighting a man stuck in his own kind of personal time warp, obsessing about things that aren't really anything to do with him. But I'm also, the other thing that's surprising about it is the lack of responsibility surrounding its impact. I mean, I think it's really tone deaf for the producers and the company not to understand that there would be a reaction to it at its time. There almost needs to be a conversation about, a kind of we need to talk about Dave moment. And somebody should have gone, okay, but we actually need to talk about whether Dave's moment has passed. So there's been a whole conversation about this for the last decade and maybe 2 decades about the comedy of negativity and punching down. Has that had its time? So when you put this kind of a show on a pedestal, then you have to expect people to come for it and to react. So, and if your defence is that it's his free speech as a comedian to say the bad stuff, then it's equally others' free speech to react and say no, tar. So don't do the surprised face when they come back in force. It's not a surprise what's in the show, so it can't be shocking what the reaction.
Yeah, and particularly in Hollywood, these issues are being flagged more than ever. And we've now seen there's certain threats of Netflix staff actually walking out. And I think Ted Sarandos, I saw a piece today that he's come out, he's apologized in terms of the way that he's been dealing with this internally. Do we think that this may have an effect on the sort of content that Netflix might commission in the future?
Well, there's all the bits of it that are shocking to me, right? The numbers. How can this be $20 million worth of stuff? How can it?
Yeah, I saw that. It's a one-off special, is it? And so but
it's part of a bigger deal, and I think it's 3 shows and it's 60 million. But so that works out about 20 million ago, right? But the thing they're saying almost is that that the comedy of hatred pays. That's one of the side messages, right? So, and it's also that maybe they need the controversy to justify this kind of spend, right? So there's the fuss is swelling the viewership. So people are going to go to it to see what the fuss is, But there are better and quieter voices on Netflix. I mentioned Gina Yashere before, Hannah Gadsby, Michelle Wolf, but this is the grandstand show. I don't get that, and I don't understand. So I don't understand their numbers, and I don't understand their metrics. I'm also shocked at who's watching it. I can't understand why anyone gay, bi, trans, or otherwise would expect there to be anything in a Dave Chappelle show for them. This is like saying to me, "Oh, Jim Davidson's on tonight. Do you want to go?" It's like, well, no. We know what's in that tin. It's said the same thing for 30 years, so why would you go there? In terms of the people, I think there's a thing about the internal workforce reactions of people who have to be in that building and where this is coming from. It makes me ask why there hasn't been an internal conversation about the ethics of content and the responsibilities that they have to their staff and to their audiences. You can't bang on about diversity and inclusion and then put it on a pause while you get the Chappelle show out as a priority. And you can't bang on about transparency and sack the most transparent person in the building, because you've already betrayed your understanding of the trans word. So it seems to me that none of the messages are saying what needs to be said. But also the thing you said about, should this change what Netflix are doing? And I hope it doesn't, right? Because I think as audiences, we have choices and we should be stronger than the urge to cancel. We've lived through, I've lived through 5 decades of there being a load of TV, a load of shows, and a load of people that don't talk to me, that don't want to talk to me, and that have taken aim at me, my life, my culture, and my lifestyle. I'm used to this stuff being widely available and also celebrated, but I'm stronger for it. I'm a big advocate of turn it off. You can't talk to me if I'm not listening. There is an off button. If it isn't for you, it's not about your taste. It's not about being made for you. You're not configured in the plan. It's not for you. Accept that and move on. Scroll, turn over, turn it off, read a book. And then I'm horrified, basically, that the Netflix whistleblower was sacked, because I think, we all have responsibility, whether we work for the tiniest indie or the biggest corporation. If we see something that we think is wrong, open your gob. And I think that should be encouraged, and I don't think it should be sat on. I get it that you're running businesses, but then manage your businesses, manage your people, talk to them, communicate. Use them because they're powerful.
And now it's time for Barry's Hero of the Week and who or what he wants to tell to get in the bin. Who's your hero of the week, Barry?
My hero is this week, next week, and every week until the end of my time is Jeremy Corbyn.
Right. Controversial.
I can't see why, and I don't want to justify it. He just is and will be forever.
All right. Good for you. And who or what are you telling to get in the bin?
So I want to bin the woman exec who I worked alongside in 1997, who was a bully then, and 30-odd years later is still a bully, and who has just spent 3 weeks bullying someone. Her reputation is known, but she's still hired. High-profile, prolific company who I'm sure pride themselves on their inclusivity and people protections, but despite knowledge, have allowed this to happen. She quaffs the right champagne in the right places, I'm sure, but people shouldn't in 2021 be forced out of workplaces because someone is so self-consumed and arrogant that they don't know how to be civil, professional, or human. So she and all bullies go in my bin.
Absolutely. I think in all our bins, and I think it's just a shame that we still keep hearing about bullying, isn't it? And often you actually think it's men who you assume are the bullies, and obviously there are a lot, and historically there's probably been more of them than women. But it's important to point that out as well. And as you say, if this is somebody that is well known in the industry, then doesn't word get around?
You hope so. I don't know if word gets to the right people, though. I think that people at a certain level, the conversation I've had about this particular thing is that the conversation has got to a certain level within this company, and it's either not gone up or it's been ignored. And I think it's a shame that, given if we all put our bullies in the bin, all our bins would be full. Or do we have enough bins? Do you know what I mean? There's a national bin crisis in television. But, I think it made me really sad because it was something that I spoke out about in 1997 and probably did me some harm back then. But I still won't be silenced. And I think, and this is the thing I'm saying about the whistleblower thing, we need them. We rely on them.
And actually, there was a Facebook whistleblower a few weeks ago that I think has made a real difference. And as BBC whistleblowers as well, as you say, they're very, very important to the democratic process of the way that we live in the media.
How do we move on if we don't know? Do you know what I mean? They're such a vital supply of inside information.
Yeah. Absolutely. Barry, it's been great to speak to you, and I'm really glad that we've hooked up and had another chat again. And enjoy your cruise, and I will see you in Austin, Texas at the end of January.
You will indeed. Thank you for having me.
Now, I was doom scrolling through social media last night, and I came across a really interesting documentary project. And in fact, I don't really know if that's the right way to describe it. But what I thought was really interesting about it is that it brings together a lot of what we've covered on TellyCast in the 18 months or so far, which is obviously talking about the TV industry, documentary production, but also burnout and maybe a little bit of psychology as well. So to tell us more about this new project, I'm delighted to welcome Sam Conniff to the show. Welcome to TellyCast, Sam.
Hello, Justin. Thank you very much indeed for having me on. And your doom scrolling is my good fortune.
As that was just literally last night, you're the quickest guest turnaround as well. So I'm delighted that social media does have a very positive effect on our conversation now. So before we get on to talking about your project, Sam, can you just give us a little bit about your background? Tell us what you do, where you come from.
Most immediately, I've come from a period of profound uncertainty because the new career I'd forged for myself a few years ago really fell apart in the early part of the pandemic. Before then, I'd surprised myself. I had written a book. The book had done really well and it's become bestseller around the world. So a new career of kind of public speaking, turning it into workshop facilitating. It's kind of around leadership and fundamentally, it's about stories of the golden age of pirates that nobody actually knew were true, which also spawned a Netflix doc of its own called Lost Kingdom. And that was my escape vehicle from a social enterprise I ran called Livity for many, many years, a project giving young people a platform that began in Brixton, spread across the UK, and then across the African continent in Nigeria and Kenya and South Africa. And in the midst of all of that, a number of things that would probably be relevant to some of your listeners. I was the producer of an interactive series called Dubplate Drama some years ago, 3 series that ran across MySpace is where it began. MySpace, MTV, right. Channel 4, late nights, 3 mobile. It was a really kind of early prototype of what's possible in scripted with a bunch of interactivity. And then more latterly worked with all the big broadcasters and Shine on a really big pan-industry diversity program, bringing young diverse talent into the industry, many of whom are now real stars across the industry.
Okay, well, that all sounds fantastic. Although it was a little while ago, it's obviously very relevant and very topical now to some of the issues that we're facing in wider society and TV industry and how we address those. But coming on to your project, your press release promises a brain-expanding, mind-altering, perception-shifting experience. Tell us about it.
Good quote to start with. Thanks very much. And that is actually a quote directly from Netflix, who came along to the pilot that we ran in May. And at that point, We didn't know that that was a fact, but we do now know that's a fact because I ran the pilot in conjunction with the team at University College London from their brain sciences laboratory, from a very specialist niche department called decision making and uncertainty. And they ran a series of rigorous tests, 3 separate scientific assessments against a control group of our audience of the pilot. And actually, that glorious quote from Netflix is true. The show was mind expanding and mind altering and brain expanding. And we could measure that we increased people's tolerance to uncertainty, their attitude and response to uncertainty, improved their abilities at decision making, open mindedness, empathy, preference for predictability, and even discomfort with ambiguity, all as a result of watching a 3-part interactive and immersive online and live documentary, which is a bunch of words, right? What it was in truth was a total experiment. It was an idea that I'd had in lockdown that had kind of begun, similar to your journey, I think, Justin. And by a process of iteration, sometimes it was a workshop, sometimes it was an online course, sometimes it was a book proposal. And then I'd been running it once as an online session in the afternoon on Zoom as we were all beginning to really reframe our understanding of what kind of the digital and watched and interactive experience was, I think. And I got my feedback sheets at the end of the session and someone said, best documentary I've ever seen. I was like, hey up. And in a moment when we were, another motherfucking Zoom call wasn't what anyone needed or wanted, I began to really get excited about my opportunity to play with genres, play with technologies, play with people's expectations. And then, as I think it was all great documentary and actually, good TV does, leave a mark on your audience, leave a positive mark and an impression. And that's what's always interested me about the genres. And I suddenly spotted there's a gap here to do something different in the emerging world that we're in. We know that docs went off the chart, as did podcasts, as did non-fiction reading material during lockdown. But it seemed to me that the biggest opportunity in video, in TV, let's call it a very broad and evolving area, was in the format that we were hating the most. There was everyone thinking, please God, not another Teams call, not another Zoom call. But to me, it seemed like that was the space for interaction. That was the space for innovation. We were escaping these screens to go and relax and binge watch on the new series of, God, I can't wait to watch Succession later, of whatever it was going to be. But the screen in front of us, that little frame, that horrible Zoom call we were seeing, that was the space that was so ripe for ripping up. And it was a kind of a failure of our own imagination to blame the limitations on this tiny little screen of communication. The chance was really to do something interesting in that space.
So the project's called The Uncertainty Experts. Tell us about why you came up with that title and how does that relate to this interactive 3-part live documentary project?
So it's March 2020, the week where all of my bookings for the year, all of the events, all the conferences, everything I was relying on had disappeared. I was divorced the year before, so I've got 2 little girls who live with me most of the week and 2 houses to pay for, and coming out of a professional high point, right? Creative high point, financial high point. And all of a sudden, I felt fucked and I felt like I was in free fall. And I had quite a lot of clients at the time, and they were also feeling very vulnerable. For many people that experienced nothing like it. And as work disappeared, I had time on my hands, and I started volunteering. I've done lots of work through Liberty with young entrepreneurs, and so I started volunteering my time to give business advice to them. Lots of creative young media professionals, and they showed up to the calls I had with them, really pretty bouncy, very resilient and ready to innovate. Whereas my clients who are my peers or my seniors were finding this moment in time very, very hard. And an idea just began to strike me. And as I looked with frustration at the daily briefings, like that plinth on the left, pseudo strategy, and that plinth on the right, like pseudo science, and that gap in the middle where creativity and humanity should have stood, calling for us to rise to this moment of fragility with some degree of creativity that kind of would match it. And I thought of these young people, and I thought of the most innovative young folks I've ever worked with was when I did a lot of work in prisons around entrepreneurship. And so I called up this guy, Carl Catamol. He wrote the book, A Survival Guide on Prison. And I just asked him for his advice on lockdown. And it was the best advice I'd had in weeks. And then I spoke to 2 or 3 other guys who I'd worked with in that similar situation. And I wrote it up as a Medium article, not very long, and I posted it. It's good advice for others. And within it, I used the term uncertainty experts. And I was just referencing the fact that, we have 1.8 million single parents in this country, 12 million people living in poverty, 480,000 refugees, staggeringly 180,000 young people in gangs, people whose daily life is uncertainty. And in this moment of uncertainty, we were looking to people who had no experience of it. The Cabinet Office at the time was celebrated for its diversity in terms of gender and ethnicity, which is to be celebrated. But there were only 3 career paths that made up the cabinet at the time of the beginning of the pandemic: law, finance, and media. And it just struck me that we're misunderstanding and overlooking people who know how to get to the end of this week. They know how to make ends meet, and crucially, they know how to spot the opportunity in the uncertainty. So I sat down one of these guys who was once heralded on the front of the Standard as London's #1 gang leader. He's now a celebrated community leader and business leader. He's just started an investment fund, multi-million-pound investment fund for young black entrepreneurs. He's regularly seen with the Bransons, the Markles. He's an incredible guy. So how did he go from gang leader to business leader? And what I began to see was the skills of uncertainty. And I mean it by saying skills, the survival strategies, the coping mechanisms, the sixth sense that's born in uncertainty is very applicable in a boardroom, in a meeting, in a creative environment when shit hits the fan. And so I started on a journey of exploration of looking for the unusual suspects. And I found refugees who'd become CEOs. I found ex-hostages who'd become healers. I found prisoners of war who'd become leadership specialists. I found people who'd been near suicide, gone through gender transition, and now world-changing scientists. Prisoners who'd become law reform. I found an incredible cast. And there was something so consistent in all of their stories. They all had very similar strategies for turning uncertainty into very, very significant opportunity.
So first of all, you've shot the documentary already. Is that right?
Its first iterations was as kind of an online workshop. And I used different camera crews, different documentary camera crews around the world. Some of the guys, Hilda is in Kampala in Uganda, Rez Ghadi is in Iraq, Dr. Ming is in California. And so I used local teams via Upwork to get good quality 4K shots done. And then they came back to me and I started to hold them together and try to work out what the interactive environment was going to be. What was this moment that Zoom was teaching us that sitting on the sofa wasn't giving us, yet this thirst for documentaries was off the chart. And so what I came up with, and this is what forms the show, 3 one-hour sessions, is in each session, we focus on a different topic. And the topics came from the research I did. What are the main negative impacts of uncertainty on you as human beings? And I had hundreds of responses from thousands of people surveyed. And they could all be categorized into 3 areas: fear, fog, and stasis. Those are the 3 main negative impacts of uncertainty in our lives. So the 3 episodes use those as their foundation. And each one explores 3 different stories of uncertainty experts and explains exactly how they turn fear into a driving force for action, how fog can be permission for creativity, and the way out of stasis as well. And so you meet these guys, you have the clips of their stories. I'm presenting their backstory. You then see some good VT of them. And then this moment happens, which is kind of the surprise reveal, where the question they pose, they finish their VT on, and it comes to your mobile phone. So you're watching along. You've been encouraged to hold your phone up to the QR code that's appearing within the documentary, and the question arrives on your phone, and you're now answering a question that's been sent to you by someone who just survived a 20-year prison sentence and is now changing laws and saving lives. And they put you on the spot, and they're asking you to reflect on your approach to uncertainty too. And then over the course of the 1-hour ep, those interactions, those points of reflection, build up a psychological profile of you and begin to take you on a journey similar to the process of self-awareness that CBT or ACT or those very successful talking therapies use. And when you start to contrast that with the qualitative analysis that the guys at UCL that I referenced did, you begin to have a very comprehensive understanding of people's experience of uncertainty, and you begin to have a very useful set of tools to help them turn, and as we were able to prove, a attitudinal shift in their response to uncertainty long term.
So who's this for then? Because this is live. So you've already shot the documentary, so it's immersive and interactive. So you have an audience that comes to a physical space in London?
No, we're broadcasting it online. We're using one of the big streaming platforms. We're using the same streaming platform that National Theatre, when they launched National Theatre at Home. It's really good, high quality streaming service. It's, some of the big streamers actually use these guys as some of their white label stuff. So the sound vision quality is nothing like, whilst I began testing it on Zoom, the quality you get is that which you'd sit down watching anything on your TV. And the next iteration, you'll be able to find this on Amazon Prime, Apple TV, Roku, etc. But for now, it's just going to be available online. I've built a little studio at home, and I've had a lot of great support and guidance along the way. I was very lucky that for the pilot episode, the pilot episode sold out before we went on air, and the last 3 tickets were bought by 3 Netflix execs, and they've pre-bought tickets to the November series, and they did so at such a scale that it's enabled me to have a bit of lifeline to invest in this next series. And it's been great to know those are going to be some of the key first audience members, because that really puts me under pressure, right? But it also means that they've been incredibly supportive and hugely creative in terms of their advice and guidance on helping me develop both scripts and the material. So no, I broadcast it from home. There are 2 presenters, me and the lead scientist on the show, Catherine Templar Lewis. And she has a film and movie background as well. So we've created the scripts between us. I tell the stories of the uncertainty experts, and we introduce the VT. We've built it in 2 different softwares using OBS and a mixing device. So we live mix in the stories of the uncertainty experts as I'm narrating them, and then we allow the uncertainty experts to reveal some of their own experiences and the insights. Those insights then ping out to the audience on their mobile phones. We get live data and information as people are having this experience, and then towards the end of the episode, it's all turned around and sent back to the audience, and they have this kind of aha moment of realization and revelation. That builds over the week in between each episodes. Catherine is an incredible science communicator, so you get as podcast episodes, the full interviews with the uncertainty experts, some science explanation content. And what we found was that 85% of the audience engaged with 3 or more bits of this content throughout the week. So there's this real reflection. There's this real chance to get involved. And there was a real frustration. People were like, why is it live? Why does it have to be live? I want to be, and we insisted on it being live. So if you miss it, you missed it. If you're late, you're not getting in. It is a live event, and you have to be there on time to do it, to get involved. There's 3 screening times each day. So there is a degree of flex, but there's a reason behind that. And then you get to the end of the 3 episodes, you get collated all the additional content, and then you do this, the second stage of scientific evaluations. And then 48 hours later, you get a personalized profile, a full report of your insights, observations, and your shift in terms of these kind of key metrics around tolerance to uncertainty. And then we take the measure again 6 weeks on. And from the pilot, what we saw was that there was an even further increase in these drivers of creativity and resilience, and a decrease in the drivers of anxiety. And the pilot audience, to answer your first question, was 25 to 50, very even split, female to male, very international, US, UK, Europe, and Australia. Mainly professional ABC One group. We got the best net promoter score I've ever seen in my life, 9.5. And a very interesting selection of people that range from firms, as I've already mentioned, from Netflix through to Salesforce, as well as a whole ton of entrepreneurs, slightly skewed female. And yeah, that group has stayed very, very loyal, very, very active, really enjoyed being part of something so early and experimental. And many of them have signed back up to the first series. And as a result, we've sold very well to individuals through recommendation predominantly. And we're beginning to sell very well to companies, group buying tickets. So TikTok, Nike, Google, Lego are just some of the very interesting brands who are seeing this as an interesting way to take their teams on a journey as well. So we've got a business audience really, as well as an ordinary consumer audience, which is kind of a fascinating breakthrough and an unusual innovation for anyone in this space.
Well, what I find really interesting about this is that it's part documentary, part self-improvement course, part training. It's really interesting, new. I think it's new. Maybe there are other similar events, if you like, going on. But I was struck by how interesting this sort of hybrid of documentary, workshop, and science is coming together. And it's a real pointer to the future in terms of interactive entertainment, I guess.
We invited one journalist along to the pilot. We didn't want to be too open. We didn't really know how it was going to go. And he's the deputy editor of Time Out. And I was really interested in his. I know him, and so I knew I could trust him. And he's written a really nice piece around it. And in fact, we've done a big media partnership with them for the last 15 years of his life. He's been going to every event, every documentary festival, every film festival, and he'd never seen anything like it. And he'd never seen anything quite that so many people saw as so interesting, because you get to about halfway through the series and you realize that the series is about the most interesting thing in your life, which is you. And that you do feel a shift. Everybody recorded a shift after the first episode. People started talking about the things they were doing differently. Then you had a currency, a new kind of set of vernacular, because you've got a story because you've been given some advice by a guy who used to run gangs and now runs businesses. But then you've seen this incredible scientist who's explained the science behind that set of decisions. And then gradually you realize how you have the capacity to do similar things yourself. So it's very, very empowering. So you're absolutely right. It's a hybrid of both well-being. I think Dave says he's got this really great quote that it's kind of part documentary, part well-being exercise, part group therapy. I think that's a really good kind of summary of the level of hybrids that it is. But again, that's the thing. I was looking for who's done interactive documentary, so I could look for some examples. And across all the film festivals, there's some amazing stuff. But predominantly, we've defaulted to interactive documentary, meaning largely user-generated content within a documentary. At this moment, with the acceleration of technology, what the expectation of our audience is to interact and be involved in something, if we can do that in these work environments, this is the chance, right? This is the chance in this moment of great fragility to really, really try and do some things differently. So, I wouldn't have had the innovation or the lessons that have come into it had it not been for the shit show of last year. And here we are at the precipice of really innovating within an already pretty innovative genre.
Yeah. Can you see this live streaming on one of the key platforms, whether it's Amazon Prime, for example, or any of the other SVOD or AVOD platforms? Is that your ambition for the show?
In stages. First things first, I want to run it again as a live event in November. And my plan is then to run a series of these as live events next year. I've already had it likened to the beginning of Punch Drunk or Secret Cinema. And I think one of the successes of those that I look up to a great deal, and I wouldn't say I was anywhere near those levels yet, is the idea that you have a series and a moment. And so for 2022, at a moment when humanity really needs to change its relationship with uncertainty, and it's proven, right? Uncertainty is the greatest driver of anxiety globally, bar none. Yet it is also this huge unlock. And if there was a moment that we needed more creativity and more resilience, this is it. So I'm really interested in running it as a series of increasing live events to fundamentally prove the science. UCL are aboard, the scientists on the team are aboard. So we're going to run as a series of live experiments with ever-increasing audiences next year. What I've loved about working in the science community, I never have before, is its openness. Every single piece of research and an academic study typically is then given back to the community for it to get larger. So if as one scientist said, Sam, you've stumbled upon a new form of CBT that can be delivered via documentary. The scope for this is incredible. At a societal level, societies with a low tolerance to uncertainty are more prone to divisive politics, populist policies and agendas, conspiracy theories. High tolerance to uncertainty look after themselves better. When there's not food on the shelves, when the groups that will pull themselves together in the uncertainty that's to come, we need societies with high tolerance to uncertainty. And the same goes for businesses. Businesses that are risk averse are not surviving. So we need this kind of work. So I'd like to prove it beyond doubt. I'd like to extend this experiment to have more companies, businesses, and organizations go through it, as well as individuals, so we know it works. And then look at how we share that. And one of the ways that I'd be very excited, I am both very nervous and very proud and very ambitious about having so many Netflix execs come along to the November screening. Because, what could be a bigger ambition than making something like this work and then having it on a platform like that in some kind of iteration? Who knows what that might look like yet. But if we can deliver some of the effects of CBT on the underlying meta challenge of the 21st century to that many people, then that gets very exciting. And for someone whose whole life has been around kind of purpose and empowerment, the coming together of both real fricka and science, the best storytelling I've ever done in my life with some of the most inspirational, interesting individuals I've ever come across on a platform like that. Well, yeah, that would be, those are my dreams.
All right. And so if anybody wants to sign up and experience the uncertainty experts, how do they do that?
You simply Google Uncertainty Experts or go straight to the website, uncertaintyexperts.com, and take a look. You'll see some of the videos, the trailers, some of the testimonials there. And if you like what you see, press buy a ticket and you'll be able to buy a ticket. And then you choose your screening time. If you're UK people, that's 9 a.m., 5 p.m. and 8:30. So that means we've got a screening that works from Shanghai to Sydney to LA to New York to Mumbai. And pick the time that suits you and be there. Tuesday, the 9th of November, it begins, then the 16th of November, then 23rd November, and know that 48 hours before the first screening, you'll be receiving your full scientific assessment. And then 48 hours after the last screening, you'll receive your full profile and breakdown of your own tolerance to uncertainty and how you can continue to improve it.
Thank you so much for coming on TellyCast. As a product of social media, I just literally saw this last night. I thought it was really interesting, and I'm really glad you could come on the show.
Can I invite you along, Justin? You know, you've clearly spotted what it is that's interesting about this. Why don't you come along to the show, and then we could come back and reflect on it on the other side.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'll be there. Fantastic. Sam Conniff, thanks very much for coming on TellyCast.
Justin, thank you.
Well, that's about it for this week's TellyCast. As always, thanks for listening. Don't forget to rate and subscribe to the show and share it with friends and colleagues. And why not follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn and Twitter. TellyCast was edited by Ian Chambers and recorded in London. Until next Thursday, as always, stay safe